Oh, it's on.
Yeah, I could tell because you were looking so sly and pleased with yourself.
Just, I try to trick you into believing it's not on because you always have a lot of good content right before I turn it on. And then you briefly become dour right when I click record.
You think you're Mark Maron.
Who?
Mark Maron.
Oh, what? How?
Well,
What?
I think part of the deal, his deal is that he has when you walk into the studio to start recording, it's already recording.
Oh, okay.
Everything is on the tape.
I thought you meant that I was approaching 40 and depressive.
Well, that's also the case. Oh, this is not relevant or is more procedural, but I was listening to a podcast the other day where they left in a whole 3 minutes where they took a break and went to get drinks and came back and just clearly forgot to edit that out and then talked about how they were going to edit it out. And then they clapped really loudly in unison so that on the file it would be clear where they needed to cut this break. And they still didn't edit it out? And all of that was left in.
There's a podcast I listen to that is the Trillbilly Workers Party. That's a leftist podcast recorded in Eastern Kentucky. And they are it's a very successful podcast. I think they make money doing it. They have a Patreon that has, thousands of contributors. There are 3 of them. I don't think anybody's getting rich on it by a huge stretch, but they're making profit, certainly. And they don't edit anything. They don't remove noise. It's like a really noisy podcast. They don't edit anything out, and it doesn't appear to matter. So maybe all labor to make a podcast more listenable is completely futile.
I think there's a type of person who cares and a type of person who doesn't.
Yeah. I guess like a leftist Eastern Kentucky labor-focused podcast, maybe I'm going to leave in all the sounds of cars bumping their jams as they drive by in our beach neighborhood from now on. But that podcast probably leans on authenticity in a way where a rough recording is okay. We don't have that luxury. The other option...
It is an aesthetic choice, I guess.
It is. The other option is we could do Justin McElroy's Serial podcast and have a constant throughout ambient sound going on that covers up any other possible noise that could be happening. In their case, it's lightly crashing waves. In ours, I guess it could be the sound of bumblebees and chirping birds.
It's city business. It's city business.
All right, well, I'm looking at our episode outline, and so historically I've usually put together our outline, but in this episode it seems like most of this was actually organized by you. Some of these bullet points I actually have no idea what they are, so I'll look forward to hearing this episode for the first time as it's happening too. I know we both want to talk about, no one would look at a day in our lives and say that is an exciting day, I don't think.
Well, listen, if right now during this global pandemic you are having days that are exciting days.
You're part of the problem.
Or they're exciting in a very bad way. Something not good. Like you're working in an emergency room.
Yeah, right.
Or
fair point.
No excitement is a good thing right now.
Right. But I go to work before you and you get home from work after me. And maybe the first time we see each other is at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night on an evening, at which point we rapidly assemble a meal, sit down in front of one episode of a program, and then I go immediately to bed afterwards to do it all over again the next day. And for the last several weeks, that program has been Naked and Afraid on Hulu. Yep. Friends of the Pod, Hulu.
Friends of the Pod.
So the premise of the show is that they, drop two people who don't know each other into some inhospitable environment. It's usually like a rainforest in Peru or something like that. And the hook is that they are, of course, naked, but...
Well, of course, they They forage for their food
Hmm.
and attempt to hunt almost inevitably without success.
Yeah. There's always an extended scene of them building and explaining the animal trap that they've constructed over the course of days. And then we get to watch their despair as it, of course, doesn't work. Because how could an animal trap work in this context?
I mean, in an environment you don't know, with animals whose behavior you don't know, using unfamiliar materials when you probably are used to having real tools also.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason you could ever expect success, but they always seem to. And they say over and over again things like, how can this not work? But something that's emerged as a very clear pattern, it's quite obvious that the producers of Naked and Afraid, anytime they're contestants, there's no prize, but anytime the subjects speak about food, they're clearly redirected by a producer to say that again, but instead of the word food, say protein.
Yeah, the word food is almost never uttered on this show. In almost every instance, they say that they're desperate for protein. We need to go out and find some protein.
Yeah, so it's a 3-week survival challenge. You can make it on very little food for that long. It's not great. But the idea that what matters most in that scenario is not calories, but is protein specifically, it seems like it says something about our culture. I'm not sure I understand what.
Well, I think maybe the fact that they, like you said, almost certainly redirect them to calling food protein encourages them to do the more dramatic activities of trying to catch a fish with their bare hands or throw a hand-fashioned spear at a rabbit they see, all that shit that doesn't work but looks good on TV. Instead of just fucking eating some grubs or, plant matter that's all around them.
Yeah, I mean, roots and grubs and termites really seem like the way to go, especially if you want protein. I think those termites are going to be the way to go. But yeah, none of that's very dramatic. If someone spends 3 hours digging at an anthill with a stick.
Yeah, but, when they say protein on the show, too, they almost always mean like big game or fish or something like that.
That's right. They don't acknowledge that
protein exists in plant sources. They refuse to acknowledge that.
Yeah, it turns out everything has some protein, actually.
Yeah.
Because that's how life on this planet actually works.
Indeed. Well, why don't you tell me what's in the garden? And then beyond that, what's in the garden that has protein in it?
Then let us cultivate our garden. It's the only way to make life endurable.
What's in the garden?
Well, again, all living things on this earth contain some protein, some amount. So what's in the garden right now that we're actually harvesting? Right now, we've got our first crop of hot peppers.
The daddles or otherwise?
Jalapenos in this case.
Oh, jalapenos. Is the daddle plant dead?
It's not dead, but it's not thriving either. We've only had one fruit. I don't know if it needs to be repotted or what. It's in the biggest pot we have.
You'd think if anything would grow well here. Daddles growing only in this micro region. They would be the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was told by the person at the farmer's market who sold me the plant that they overwintered just fine. And it did seem to live all winter.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't really, I mean, it's got foliage and stuff, and I've given it some fertilizer, but maybe not enough.
It didn't seem like it liked the first part of the summer where there was no rain but constant beating sun very much.
The problem, one of the biggest problems we face here is a binary choice between way too much sun and way not enough sun in the two sides of our yard. There's really nowhere that gets a reasonable amount of sunlight, nowhere that gets sunlight in the morning. It's either punishing unbroken afternoon sun or no sun at all.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe it needs to get moved to the no sun at all area, and maybe that'll make it happy.
Well, that ultimately was better for the tomatoes.
Well, something ate them, actually.
Oh, ooh. You think it's that raccoon that I'm afraid of?
I don't know what it is. Something came and chewed the plants off at the...
They just ate the tomato plant
like at
in
the
one
soil.
bite?
Yeah. Well, no, they cut it down. They cut
Okay.
through the stem, and now they're just
There's
gone.
nothing.
Yeah.
Wow. What, do you have any speculation on what did that?
I guess a bug.
I was thinking something big and scary that ate the whole plant in one bite, like a gator.
Yeah, it was probably a gator.
Yeah, they love plants
So the tomatoes back there are actually not doing well at all.
because they don't exist.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
But the tomato that's in the front actually is doing well because it's found some limited shade by crawling up that landscaping,
oh,
that
cool.
bush.
Great.
It's trellising itself. It's now, I think the last time I updated you on it, I said it was about 10 feet tall. I would say it's 12 to 14 feet tall now.
Do you think at some point it will stop growing up and start making tomatoes?
It has begun to make tomatoes.
Wow. Terrific.
Probably, well, whatever. I'm just going to let it do whatever it wants at this point.
That's rarely a position that gardeners take.
Well, I don't think
Letting
it's the
their
right
plants
one.
do whatever they want.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bad
The
strategy.
whole thing is exerting mastery over the land, crafting it in your vision.
Yeah, I've given up.
Okay.
The other thing, we have cucumbers. I mentioned the cucumber vines had really taken off. At this point, we have quite a number of maybe 1-inch cucumbers. I'm not sure how long it will take for them to be cucumber sized, but we do have a lot of them. So I hope that we get to eat some of them and that some animal doesn't come along and eat them before they're ripe.
How does anyone stop animals from eating their shit? Should we spray pesticides on all of our stuff?
No, that's not really how that works. I mean, the thing to do is to put some sort of a cage around it.
It's hostile architecture for bugs and animals.
Well, you might recall that when we moved into our house in Durham, the last place we lived in Durham, there actually was a small electric fence around the garden perimeter that was meant for electrocuting squirrels. But I'm positive that any squirrel, once electrocuted, would learn to just hop over this fence.
It was capable of that.
Yeah.
Was it activated?
No, the people who lived there before us hadn't been gardening at all, but the little electric fence was still up. And
they weren't gardening because they were too busy doing high crime.
I think just regular crime.
I guess they weren't doing murder or whatnot, but they were doing...
Treason.
They were doing grand theft was what they were doing. Weren't the walls filled with cash stashes and jewels? Do I remember that they had jewels?
Again, they were just people who, when other people broke into houses and stole things, then they fenced the stolen property.
Oh, they're thief middlemen?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow, I didn't know that job existed.
Yeah, they had installed some sort of a gold melting device in the laundry room.
Shocking.
Like using the high voltage plugs for the washer and dryer.
Oh man, they had a much cooler life in that house than we did.
Yeah.
In any case, they put up an electric fence around the garden.
Well, they didn't. I think
the previous owners, yeah.
But no, I didn't use it. I wasn't interested in electrocuting any squirrels.
But that's free protein. Get some protein. All right, so we have emergent cucumbers.
We have two things growing in the garden of note. One is now we have chayote in the garden.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I saw this on our outline. Did you plant seeds from the chayote that we got?
Yeah, so as you'll recall, I bought two of those fruits.
Yeah.
And we ate one and decided it was pretty good.
Yeah, it was good.
And so I planted the other one.
Awesome. Do you plant the whole fruit?
That is, in fact, how you grow it. You plant the whole fruit.
Okay.
It's not reliable to grow it just from seed. It uses the fruit as it grows, and it's already got a couple sets of leaves.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that would be a real treat. What an unexpected delight that would be.
Yeah, so, I mean, let's see what happens. The instructions I read cautioned that it wouldn't do well in a pot,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have very many other options at this point, so it is in a pot. I might try to transplant it later. It's possible it just won't be very productive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and we do have one non-plant new addition to the garden, which are 1,000,000 cinder blocks that I hated carrying back there.
So it's a little bit of a... There was probably a less heavy and more eco-friendly way to do this, but...
You needed a barrier against the lawnmower man.
Yeah, I couldn't handle the lawnmower going over my plants again. So last weekend, I asked you to go out and get some cinder blocks, which I guess makes us also part of the problem.
Yeah, we're the
comes
problem.
To coronavirus. But I needed to put up some sort of barrier. And so I did.
Wow, dear listener, you're getting to hear one of our 4 daily downpours right now. You're getting to hear it's torrential. You're getting to hear the sound of the water that's going to kill the things that you just planted.
Well, so actually this brings us to a potential new segment I've been thinking about introducing that I would like to call Compost Corner. So after putting those cinder blocks in to prevent any further lawn mowing incidents, I built some roughly lasagna-ish beds, so lasagna beds are a composting in place technique where instead of composting in one pile and then applying it to the garden, you make a big pile of all the stuff that would normally go into the compost pile and you let it break down in place and you can plant stuff in that.
And it's layered in the way that lasagna is layered?
That's right. So it's, you alternate layers of green and brown material as you would in other types of composting. And cheese. You sprinkle cheese in there. So it's got cardboard boxes and brown, dried old leaves and lots of Spanish moss because we have a lot of that here.
And the accompanying chiggers?
Yeah.
Those are free protein.
I suppose they are, yeah. And then over a portion of that, I threw basically everything that was still in the garage that I was intending to use to plant things in any way. So it was like a couple bags of potting soil and some miscellany, some perlite, some worm castings, just to have some soil that I could plant a few things in.
Sure.
And so I planted a bunch of mostly arugula back there that seems to have sprouted well in the last week. So maybe we'll have a garden here finally.
And really arugula again, which has, as we've said, for many years has been our staple, but we've suffered from a real lack of arugula over the last several months. Our bodies have wasted without it.
Withered away.
Yeah.
The other thing that we have in the garden is a thing I discovered called spurge nettles.
Did you discover it because it wreaked havoc on your body?
Yeah, I discovered it because I touched it while I was installing the lasagna beds. And then it hurt. And then I investigated. And it turns out that these are potentially edible. I've actually chosen not to remove them, mostly because I didn't feel like trying to touch them anymore.
What a gentle soul you are to not rip out the thing that caused you so much pain and suffering.
Well, if we
you didn't take vengeance on it.
Well, if we get really desperate, then we can always eat those spurge nettle roots back there.
Huh.
So I'm really just saving them for the desperate future.
That we have now come to understand is certain. Everything that you talk about now, internally, I'm thinking, how much protein does it have in it? Hold on.
Are you going to Google how much protein in spurge nettle roots?
Bet I am.
I don't think the internet even knows that.
Are you fucking kidding me? You think the internet doesn't know that? I Googled I Googled spurge nettle root protein, and it, Google will, if it thinks it's very confident in the answer, just populate it itself at the top.
Yeah.
It did.
Wow.
It's not super useful, but it's 5.5% protein by weight, I guess.
All right. Well, I was wrong. I guess you know.
can't believe you would claim Google wouldn't know a thing.
The idea that the nutritional content of spurge nettle has made it outside of one isolated academic work surprises me.
Well, probably some other desperate folks figured it out.
The other thing that's been taking up much or most of my free time is that I've gotten back into Stardew Valley.
Yeah. There's a brief respite there, but you've gone hard and strong once more.
Yeah, there was a period where I was really into it. Then I stopped for several weeks or maybe even a couple months. Time passes in a weird way now.
Yeah, that's right.
But I've gotten back into Stardew Valley.
For those who may not have listened to that episode, it's like broadly speaking, a farming simulator.
Yeah, it's a casual game where you have a cute farm and you plant things and harvest them.
Yeah.
And I finally acquired the ability to barrel age products.
Wow.
So I can make really high quality wines, for example. So in the game, there are kegs and you can put fruits and vegetables and grains into kegs. If you put wheat into the keg, you get beer out.
Sure.
So I thought, wow, I have these barrels now. I'm going to put corn in the keg.
Oh, so you could get whiskey.
Yeah. And then I'm going to barrel age my whiskey and I'm going to make whiskey. Well, if you put corn in the keg, what you in fact get out is called corn juice.
Wow, gross.
Yeah. And I did not try putting that in a keg because I don't see... I was just so disappointed.
Barrel-aged corn juice.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it doesn't even let you put it in a keg. I have no idea. Or maybe if I'd put it in a keg, it would have somehow turned into whiskey at that point. I don't know. But all I know is I was so upset by the idea that my corn fermented into something called corn juice.
Maybe like in a sort of Prohibition era situation, they would have called their whiskey corn juice to not draw the attention of the authorities.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
and so children could drink it too.
Well, I think during Prohibition, they would sell juices and say with instructions on the bottle that would say, like, don't uncork this and then let it sit out for 5 days. Otherwise, it'll turn into alcohol.
Something
and that
terrible
would
will
be
happen.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. My disappointment was so enormous.
Did you try drinking it?
No, I just sold it.
Who did you sell it to? Who wanted corn juice?
Well, the way the game works is that you just have a box on your farm, and anything you put into the box gets sold the next day at whatever the market price for that item is.
But not to someone else in town.
Well, you don't know who, but every day
like Bitcoin.
The mayor of the town
Is
comes.
corn juice the Bitcoin of this game?
As in his duties as mayor, he comes and collects all of your farm produce that you've left in the box, and then he leaves money for you.
The mayor's definitely drinking your corn juice.
I assume, yeah. He's pretty sketchy, actually. And if you put rice in the keg, you get rice juice. This is a known problem. It turns out other people on the internet have
But wheat
complained
does
about
give you
this.
beer.
But wheat gives you beer, and somehow rice doesn't give you sake, and corn does not give you bourbon.
It's a real bug. Well, we're going back to the well here one more time on one of our favorite catalogs. It's the first catalog that I've gotten in the mail thus far that has had the year 2021 written on it. And such is my desperation for it not to be the year 2020 anymore. I was excited to look at it. This is an old favorite. It is Strictly Medicinal. This is their fall-winter 2020-2021 catalog. We spoke a little about Strictly Medicinal. I forget what episode it was.
April.
It was back in April. It might have been 10 episodes ago at this point. But we re-listened to it and realized we'd didn't talk about it very much, actually, in the episode.
We didn't talk about any medicinal plants
Yeah,
specifically.
it was a real omission. And also, since then, a listener named Zach wrote us and suggested that we look at Strictly Medicinal. And that made me realize that we really hadn't done it justice before. So we appreciate that recommendation. And if anybody has any other recommendations for catalogs to look at, we eagerly embrace those.
Yes, definitely.
So Strictly Medicinal it's a company out of Williams, Oregon. It's a family business. The family is the Czech family, they are known as. It's C-E-C-H, pronounced Czech. And it is a husband and wife, Richo and Meche. I'm pronouncing those, I'm almost certain, incorrectly. When I saw the name Richo, I was like, oh, is that like maybe I thought it was Hispanic or something like that. And then I looked and his name is Richard. So I think actually that's just Richo, like Dano or Bobo.
Got it.
Richo. A couple of real hippies, it seems like. They had founded the business in 1985. It was originally called Horizon Herbs. Adorably, their first catalog was just a few pages long and had their 8-year-old daughter Naja's drawing of a calendula flower on the front. So these days, it looks like Richo writes all the descriptions for the catalog, and the illustrations are done by another one of his daughters, Sena. And the illustrations are something that we really loved when we looked at this before.
Yeah, they're great. It's a really beautiful catalog.
It looks like it costs the least amount of money to produce of any of the catalogs that we've seen.
It's a really simple, it's newsprint.
They use soy-based ink, it says in the catalog.
But yeah, they're just beautiful line drawings to illustrate the plants.
Hmm.
The layout is just a simple 2-column format.
So like you said, we thought we would actually get into some of the medicinal herbs this time. So their medicinal herbs section of the catalog notes they are trying to empower self-sufficiency. So, I mean, it really does follow, if you want to garden in order to grow the food that you use to sustain yourself so that you may be self-sufficient, you may also want to grow the herbs you need to treat yourself medicinally instead of having to go to a doctor or hospital.
Let's just get into reading these descriptions.
For sure.
Because they're great.
They are great.
Aconite. Finest of herbaceous perennials for the discriminating medicinal herb gardener. Thriving best in rich soil and part shade. All parts are toxic. Unless properly prepared. Toxic is all caps and bold.
Yeah. I love that the very first herb in this catalog has the phrase, all parts are toxic in it unless properly prepared. It's treacherous to grow and ingest a ton of these.
Sow in fall for germination in the spring. Sow in cool, moist shade and grow in cool, moist shade. We test our aconite seeds regularly to assure viability.
By test them, do they mean take them as medicine to test their efficacy?
They mean do a germination test like we learned about at the Seed Savers Exchange conference.
But in my mind, they're smearing all of these herbs all over their bodies and ingesting them to make sure that they do what they claim they do. We're very careful to not make medical claims.
Are we? I am pretty sure in the last Strictly Medicinal discussion,
I claimed that a number of these would cure the novel coronavirus.
Yeah.
I gave my personal guarantee.
We also, I believe, discussed how smoking cigarettes might
be good for you.
Yeah. Neither of us is a medical doctor.
But this catalog, it seems like legally they should have to have more. They should have to have more disclaimers than they actually do.
Chinese aconite. Herbaceous perennial native to China. Bears extraordinary light blue flowers shaped like schools of heavy-jawed fish of the coral reef. In traditional Chinese medicine, the processed root is used for warming the internal fire, improving circulation, and tonifying the kidneys.
Tonifying the kidneys. like tuning them up? Is that what that is
I
getting at?
assume it means it makes you pee a lot. I don't know.
I mean, that's what it... Is that what it mean to have toned kidneys? To have ripped, toned kidneys? Is to ensure that you pee a lot. Also, the flowers are shaped like schools of heavy-jawed fish.
Schools of heavy-jawed fish of the coral reef.
Yeah, we all know what that looks like.
I thought that was a great description.
It's both evocative and I have no idea what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like simultaneously.
Aloe parvibracteata, the spotted aloe. Clumping succulent native to the South African savanna with long, spotted, flattened, purplish leaves. Flowers pink to orange. Extremely fine as an indoor potted plant. Very soft-leaved and comely. There's a really nice little set of line drawings illustrating the leaf shapes of different herbs.
Yeah.
All in the Lamiaceae family. So they're all mints. And so there's pictures of basil, lemon balm, catnip, tulsi, and mint.
And underneath, captioned in the handwriting of the person who drew them, it says, though similar in morphology, they vary greatly in smell. I'll do some reading as well. I just want the listener to know that each of the descriptions I'll be reading in this episode, this isn't true of the ones Allison is going to be reading, but each of the ones I will be reading will be something that I have experimented taking in order to treat or prevent the novel coronavirus.
Wait, you've taken all of these things?
All the things that I'll be reading description-wise in this episode. I know that that's
what
troubling.
A revelation.
It's
I'm
pretty
troubled.
upsetting.
We should mention at this point that you have not had the novel coronavirus.
I was just experimenting for prophylactic purposes. Or in case
we
do at some point.
Oh no.
Don't worry, it's all fine. First of those is Andrographis, also known as the King of Bitters. Annual but long season. Native to China and India. Used in treating sluggish digestion, gastroenteritis, and Lyme. Sow in spring. So look, I just want to point out that although I have been taking these for the purposes of COVID, also if I get gastroenteritis or Lyme, or if I have sluggish digestion, it could help me.
Is sluggish digestion... I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird euphemisms in this. Constipation, I assume?
I feel like they would just say constipation.
Maybe. I mean, bitters in general, are known to aid digestion, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Whatever that means.
Yeah. Maybe it just means helps you have good poop.
I think it means that it balances your humors so that you have the right amount of bile.
Yeah, yellow bile versus black bile.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And while I'm in this area alphabetically, I'll also read Astragalus, herbaceous perennial native to China, king of tonic herbs. Astragalus is an anabolic immunostimulant, prefers full sun, average soil, good drainage, sow in spring. Anabolic immunostimulant.
So here's the thing about taking an immunostimulant. You have an autoimmune disorder.
It's all true.
Are you positive that you would like to stimulate your immune system?
From what I've read in this, the narrow way that this works, yes. I think it's just a T cell stimulant largely.
Well, you're the medical doctor. I guess you know what you're doing.
I would also stop taking it if I got COVID. That would be my plan.
Interesting.
You don't want to overstimulate.
Burdock. Most useful when grown as an annual. 70 days to root harvest. Hardy taprooted biennials with wide leaves make scrumptious and medicinally charged roots the first year. Gobo. Gobo is just the Japanese word for burdock.
Okay.
standard medicinal plant making taproots sometimes as big as your forearm. Combined with dandelion, a trustworthy blood cleanser for treatment of many ills, including staph. Okay, so
How do they get around? Like, that is a claim that this will cure a staph infection, which it almost certainly won't. How do they get around that
well, I
as
mean,
a claim?
they're not selling
They're selling seeds.
They're not selling you a bottle of the plant.
That's
so
true.
they're not restricted in the same way that a supplement company might be.
Sure.
So burdock root is just a nice vegetable that people eat in Japan that we, for some reason, don't really eat here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure people eat it in lots of other parts of the world, but it's, for whatever reason, has not ever become popular in
What's
the
it
U.S.
like?
Meh, sort of earthy.
All right, well, I'll read echinacea. You can't possibly have any problem with my taking echinacea. Everybody takes echinacea. Come on.
Hold 1 second. Blood cleanser. Again, I truly enjoy this catalog, but it is unclear to me what it means to cleanse the blood.
It's like giving yourself an at-home transfusion just by taking some of that herb.
It doesn't say it gives you more blood. It just says it cleanses the blood you already have.
It's like, or how about like like kidney dialysis, where you
That's
take
what it
the
is. It's
fluid
dialysis.
out. It's dialysis.
All right. You've sold
You're
me.
sold. All right, echinacea. All species are incredibly beautiful. What a great start to let's get this out of the way. They look awesome. All species are incredibly beautiful. Echinacea prefers full sun, well-drained soil, and regular watering. Most species will germ in 2 to 3 weeks in a warm, not too hot greenhouse when watered gently. A period of cold, moist refrigeration increases germ. Most species do well planted 2 feet apart, so in fall or early spring. They also have 2 varieties. There's Echinacea angustifolia, which is the narrow-leafed coneflower. It's a herbaceous perennial. Most herbalists consider this to be the strongest of all the species in terms of medicinal activity. And the Echinacea tennescensis, oh my God, how can I possibly say that word? Tennescensis. It's the Tennessee purple coneflower. Tennesseseensis. It's like the Mississippi of Latin words. Tennesseensis?
Tennesseensis.
Oh boy, that's hard for me. Tennessee purple.
It's Tennesseensis.
Okay, fair. Tennessee purple coneflower. Rare endemic species native to Tennessee. Deep purple, upwardly reflexed ray flowers. And that's not a particularly poetic phrase, but as far as sentences in a seed catalog go, few of them, I think, feel as good to say as deep purple, upwardly reflexed ray flowers. It's real good.
Yeah, that is good. Comfrey. Multi-purpose healing, permaculture, and animal food plant. We offer 2 types. 1, the true, fertile, original, and exquisite Symphytum officinale. And 2, the extremely useful, robust, and fast-growing Russian Bocking 14 cultivar, Symphytum crossed with Uplandicum. The roots and leaves of both types contain the cell proliferant allantoin. Fall is a good time to plant comfrey.
To continue with my pharmaceutical catalog here, I'll read the Umbca geranium, the Pelargonium sidoides. Zones 8 to 12, otherwise nicely grown as a potted plant. Brought in for the winter, native to South Africa. The plant smells great, is forgiving to the touch, makes royal maroon flowers, and has a root that is traditionally and effectively used for treating upper respiratory infection. Dries secretions.
Is that how you get a dry-ass pussy?
A dap? Wait, is dapping that now hackneyed dance maneuver.
That is dabbing.
Dabbing? Okay. You would dab a wet ass pussy. But a dry ass pussy you could achieve via geranium ingestion would be a dap. I don't necessarily want to read this description, but there's another thing on the giant blazing star on this page that they claim is used to treat rheumatism, arthritis, earache, fever, smallpox. The idea.
The idea that if you had smallpox, first of all, if you had smallpox, which has been eradicated from the face of the earth, unless we do biological warfare, which it seems like there are no rules, so who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, in an absolute triumph of
The only
vaccination,
good thing that humans have ever done, basically.
we completely eliminated smallpox from the face of the earth by vaccinating people.
How do you know it wasn't by mass distribution of the giant blazing star?
Well, anyway, if you come down with smallpox, presumably someone is going to be very alarmed and very interested in treating
How
that.
happened, yeah.
Yeah, with probably not giant blazing star.
Yeah, probably not. Also, if you chew on the roots, it prevents thirst, which is insane. Are the roots very watery? Because that's the only way that could be true.
They might be sort of like mucilaginous or something and keeps your mouth from drying out.
Could be.
I'm willing to believe chewing on something reduces thirst. That seems plausible.
Okay.
Well, speaking of wet-ass pussies.
Oh, thank God. This is the description I've been waiting for.
Full disclosure. I'm actually going back in time to the spring-summer 2020 catalog because this description has been revised to be less delectable.
The author thought better of the description that they had written earlier this year, and in the winter 2021 catalog, it's very truncated. They did some self-editing, but I think that was not advisable because the original description is terrific.
Squirting cucumber.
Mm-hmm.
Perennial vine native to the Mediterranean. A trick plant that ejects its seeds in a startling manner, often humorous. Dainty mounds produce large golden blossoms, giving way to 1-inch, bluntly horned fruits that forcibly eject the viscid sap and seeds. Source of the low-dose laxative molecule elitarin. Standard culture, sun, and fast draining. Rich soils unhelpful. I have to share one tiny thought about all this. It is
Incidentally, this is not Allison saying this. This is part of the description.
I'm still reading. I have to share one tiny thought about all this. It is slightly absurd that I spend such a large part of my summer chasing after squirting cucumber seeds. One would think I would have better things to do. But then where would a plant like Ecbolium be without the assistance of a few mad people who somehow value its evident absurdities? And then
so good.
This page is illustrated with a picture of a squirting cucumber engaged in the act of squirting. It's in the moment of squirting.
A thing also that I like, what's the philosophy where you would use a plant medicinally, not based on like its chemical content, but based on what it looks like? One of those big mushrooms that looks like a dick would be a boner pill or something like that.
That's why almost everything you can use for your boner.
Right,
because
everything
things
looks
are
like
longer
a boner.
than they are. If it's longer than it is wide, then it'll give you a boner.
Yeah. This sort of harkens to that with the fact that let's not lose sight that this is a laxative. So the idea that ingesting this would perhaps force you to shoot diarrhea out of your own ass is very funny to me.
So the other thing about this is I would bet you a lot of plants are laxative.
Sure.
In the sense that they make you very sick if you eat them.
Yeah, they're really framing that as a perk here, when in fact it might mean it poisons you until you shit water.
Mandrake. Toxic. Herbaceous perennials. The ancients used mandrake root as a fertility herb, an aphrodisiac, a magical totem, an anesthetic, analgesic, and sleep inducer. Misused, it was known to cause strange delirium and madness. The root is a low-dose botanical that should be approached with caution. Low dose is their euphemism for...
Extremely poisonous.
Poisonous, yeah.
Speaking of poisons, by the way, they have a whole, like, not only are a lot of these listed as toxic, but they have, like, belladonna and stuff that is, I only know as poison.
Yeah, I mean, they've got their uses, I'm sure. Atropine, of course, which is named for the Greek fate who cuts the thread of your life.
Right.
Even the medicine is named after a chemical. I mean, it's named for its danger. Atropine and scopolamine. So, I mean, there are real legitimate medicines that are used to this day.
I'll read one that seems really pleasurable to me. It's the Corsican mint. It's perennial creeping ground cover to 2 inches, native to Europe, moss-like. When stepped upon, the plants yield with a spongy niceness, remain undamaged, and meanwhile emit a pure spearmint aroma. Traditional usage of the fresh or dried leaves, flavoring agent, aromatherapy, digestive tea, non-caffeine stimulant. I mean, the idea that it's soft moss that yields with a spongy niceness under your feet. You could walk on it with your bare feet, would feel so good, and emits a pure spearmint aroma as you do it.
Why don't we have that as our lawns?
Yeah.
Why don't we have
grass.
beautifully scented, spongy lawns that never need to be mowed?
And smell terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine that world. What a delight.
Well, we wouldn't get to waste all the water that is wasted in our neighborhood by sprinkler systems, when in fact there are 4 downpours a day here.
Okay, well, I actually do have one more. It's 2 more. It's a pair.
Okay.
False unicorn. Herbaceous dioecious perennial, native to the central and eastern hardwood forests of North America. Rare and in danger of extinction. We offer only seed of cultivated individuals. The flowers occur in gracefully curving spikes. Most famous of all uterine tonics.
Wow.
Sow seeds in acidic soil in the fall, midwinter, or very early spring. True unicorn. Perennial. Native to southeastern U.S. Rare. Important vanishing medicinal. Urn-shaped, mealy surfaced flowers. White. Plant prefers sun and moist, sandy, acidic soils. So I don't know what true unicorn is.
Neither do I. Well, the false unicorn is the one that's a good uterine tonic. I don't even know what the true unicorn's for.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Huh. There's false unicorn.
Maybe it's like a Greenland, Iceland scenario where, you know what I'm talking about? Where they named Iceland that even though it was lush to try to trick folks. I'm sure that's apocryphal. But maybe in this case, they didn't want everybody to get their hands on their great uterine tonic, so they named it the false unicorn.
I also just, when I first looked at this, I mean, I assumed false unicorn was false because it's not a real unicorn, but then immediately below is true unicorn.
Yeah, it's confusing. I'm sorry. I think we're done reading these, but I just came across one.
Read one more for good measure. Read it. Take it seriously.
This is the pellitory, also known as the Spanish chamomile or Mount Atlas daisy. Herbaceous or evergreen perennial native to the Mediterranean and the Himalayas, similar in growth to Roman chamomile. Traditional usage, nervine tonic, paralysis, dental woes, testosterone. I'm sorry. There's an herb that cures just general paralysis.
Dental woes,
yeah.
Paralysis, and testosterone.
Yeah. I mean, you've got bigger problems if you have paralysis than dental woes or low testosterone.
I mean, I would put that in the smallpox category if you're experiencing paralysis.
You got to bring out the heavy guns, not Spanish chamomile.
Well, though you, again, to be fair, have apparently been assembling a real arsenal of herbal products as your first line of defense.
Yeah, I mean,
COVID.
I've been accumulating them, on the misguided belief that really it's just to feel less stressed out, obviously. But I'm sure if I looked them all up, I'm sure there's some claim for each of them that is extraordinary beyond, viral clearance or whatnot. Maybe one of these would cure smallpox too.
Best way to cure smallpox is to vaccinate against smallpox. And by that, I mean snort the burned scabs of a recovering smallpox patient.
It's the only way.
What people did before there was a vaccine.
Yeah. You got to find some coronavirus detritus to huff. All right. Before we go, I thought we could read through just a couple reviews. I thought maybe we would do some herb reviews because that was the sort of focus of this catalog in this episode. So I found some curious ones.
Lay it on me.
Well, I'm on Burpee, which is usually where I go for reviews because there are some wild people on this board.
Well, and not every catalog allows reviews on their website.
Yeah. So I was, so I'm on Burpee. I was looking through the catnip reviews, which are largely charming because it's all, I'm imagining old people who are delighted by their cat's response to this. Although we are not yet old people and we would be delighted by our cat's response too. But it's a lot of just cute reviews with people happy about their cat's delight. There's one that is written in all caps, so you gotta think it's an old person in that case. It's by Kenny B as opposed to Kenny G.
Yes, so.
They're from Central Florida, so they're our neighbors. It's in all caps, and I could read it as though it were in all caps, but I'll elect not to. Decided to place in containers, as I understand the plant's roots may want to wander and take over some spaces. Tremendous growing capacity in the sunny state. After maturity, normal growth in a week meant overflowing the container. Then after pruning back a few weeks later, more cat smiles to cut. Dry and store in a shoebox. Curiously, I found a flat hole in my biggest plant, and later one night found the neighbor's cat asleep. Parentheses, toasted? Question mark. in the middle of it. I really like that this old person's, their generational euphemism for being high is to get toasted. And
to be clear, you know that they're old because they typed their review in all caps.
That's right.
There's literally no other. There's one demographic of person who types in all caps.
Yeah. Anyway, later one night I found the neighbor's cat asleep, toasted in the middle of it. Before being totally ruined, I round fenced all containers. Now I only have covered piles as reminders of their frustrated nightly visits. I thought that was nice.
That's very funny.
There's one where we read about my use of chamomile in the last catalog. There's a chamomile review here titled Great Medicinal Qualities. Vigorous plant that is lovely in my herb garden and flowers for almost 2 months. Has fern-like leaves. I dry the flowers and store them for winter. I have spastic colon, and this tea stops it from cramping. All these years I suffered, and a simple God-made flower has given me complete relief.
Well, I'm glad they've got complete relief.
I am, but you think that Strictly Medicinal makes some extravagant claims about all, but curing spastic colon was not one of them, I don't think. Go look up chamomile again and see if any of the chamomile descriptions claim to settle your spastic colon.
Well, it does say calming to the stomach, improves digestion.
All right, I guess that's true.
It's not so specific.
Well, that God-made flower is pretty powerful. Finally, I'm going to read a review of the burpee stevia that they sell, which we've spoken about before. I don't think we're huge fans of its common use. I am more confused by this review than any I have ever read. Listen carefully. This review is by Rand. So take from that what you will. I don't know a lot of Rands that I'm a huge fan of. It's from Rand in North Carolina. It's 3 out of 5 stars. It's titled, Ghost Spook Gremlins in the Mix. And it reads, some of the tries, spelled Trys, some of the tries I had this year's season haven't worked out, but I will keep on trying as usual. I blame gremlins in the mix, along with atmospheric additives and the resultant conditionals that make it harder to grow successfully these days and nights. Gremlins being multidimensional meddlers who promote their own agendas and bother any that diverge from their want of programming lives and souls and their plants or even their own humanoid offsprings or makings of lack thereof.
I mean, that was written by an AI.
Yeah?
Don't you think?
No, I don't think.
It's so bizarre.
Under reviews, it'll say, was this helpful?
How many people thought that was helpful?
Out of 14 respondents, 5 thought it was helpful. Which is almost the funniest number it could have been. I blame gremlins in the mix along with atmospheric additives and the resultant conditionals that make it harder to grow successfully these days and nights. Gremlins being multidimensional meddlers who promote their own agendas and bother any that diverge from their want of programming lives and souls and their plants or even their own humanoid offsprings or making of lack thereof.
I mean, doesn't that seem like something that's been Google translated from one language to another language to a third language? Especially the way it goes off the rails. The further it goes, the more the actual grammar becomes incoherent.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
that
I'm sorry.
Markov chain got...
What amount of Google translating back and forth gets you gremlins being multidimensional meddlers who promote their own agendas?
Well, they had to tell you what gremlins are. They introduced the concept of gremlins, and then they just wanted to be sure that you were on the same page.
Yeah, this is a review of stevia seeds, man.
So you think a human being wrote this?
I think a human being grew this stevia plant and reviewed it as 3 out of 5 stars by writing this passage. Yes.
Boy. What a world.
Only burpee. All right. Well, if you're so inclined, you...
Wait, hold on. We forgot a really important part of this episode.
What's that?
We received our first review on iTunes. First of all, it's a landmark event for the podcast. And second of all, it goes straight to the heart of our greatest relationship disagreements.
There are reviews written by Shark113333333. It's titled As Advertised. I stumbled upon this podcast somehow and decided to give it a listen after reading the description of, quote, pathologically low-stakes conversation. Selected the most recent episode, and the first sentence, no intro music, no introductions, no warm-up, was about how no products in this world are created without slave labor. Decided not to make that my first episode, and have found the pod is indeed, as advertised, low stakes, very entertaining. 5 stars. So what we take from this is that when we're going to talk about how there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, that should come in minute 30 instead of in second 1.
Well, the 2 things. One, yes, you love to take the most provocative moment of audio and put it at the beginning of the episode, which is pretty funny, but it also assumes a listener who is
gonna tolerate that.
Yeah. And And often this is something that you've tried to trick me into saying by pretending that you're not already recording, as we discussed at the beginning of the episode. But also, I've taken the position that this podcast should ideally provide some respite from how the world is terrible.
And I'm agreeing with you, except for my strong belief that there is no respite. All right. Well, if you're so inclined, you can elect to follow us on Twitter at @CDBusiness or on Instagram at cdbusinesspod. You can email us at cdbusinesspod@gmail.com.
We really appreciate the effort that this person took to write the review.
Absolutely. If you want to leave us a review, however critical, we will certainly read it on the podcast because it's delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if the gremlins haven't gotten all your plants, you should eat your vegetables.
We're all just doing the best we can.
Speak for yourself.
It's CD business. It's CD business. Boring talk about seeds, CD talk between pores. Mind-numbing chatter about ovules and spores. We'll take a ditch and one bone and split the difference. It's CD business. It's CD business.